Hello and welcome to the program on Mastering Lookup Formulas and High-Powered Alternative Techniques. On behalf of Aurora Training Advantage, I would like to thank you for joining us. Your guest speaker today is David Ringstrom. David owns Accounting Advisors, Inc., a spreadsheet and database consulting firm that he started in 1991. In addition to teaching scores of webinars each year on Excel and other topics, David has written hundreds of freelance articles on spreadsheets. He has served as a technical editor for dozens of books and accounting software, and his first book was published in February 2016. David's company provides training and consulting services nationwide. Questions can be entered in a control panel, and as many as possible will be answered during and at the end of the presentation. For those interested in CPE credit, there will be a series of polling questions throughout the program, and all of them must be answered to qualify. Enjoy the program.
Thank you, Isaac. Hello, everyone. I'm David Ringstrom, a CPA in Atlanta, and welcome to Mastering Lookup Formulas and High-Powered Alternative Techniques. Over the course of our time together today, we are going to start out looking at Excel's VLOOKUP function, which is typically the first lookup function that folks learn in Excel. And VLOOKUP does a good job, and it helps us get a certain bit down the road, but it also has a lot of constraints to it. So that's why we're also going to look at some other alternatives to using VLOOKUP. If you're not presently using lookup formulas in Excel, they are definitely one of the best ways to be able to write spreadsheets more efficiently and also have better integrity, because it allows you to turn the tide. One of the phrases I coined a number of years ago is either you work Excel or it works you. And for a lot of folks, Excel is working them. And so if you're not using lookup formulas and you're manually going and saying equals and then hunting down the piece of data you want and clicking on that cell and then doing that any number of times, then that is just where Excel is grinding you down. And when instead we can make Excel do the work for us by way of lookup formulas and some of these other techniques. The presentation is designed to be interactive, so do feel free to pick my brain as we go through the material, or if there's anything that you wish to see again, let me know that as well. I will be happy to go back over any of the concepts. There will be 5 polling questions, so do be sure to be on the lookout for those and respond to all of those. In the event that things make sense during our time together today, but then you go to apply some of these techniques and then get stuck, do feel free to reach out by email. I'm always happy to answer follow-up questions from anyone that has attended one of my presentations. With that, we'll go ahead and get our first poll question out of the way. So we're going to see what version of Excel you're using. If you're using Excel 2016, 2013, 2010, or 2007. If you are using a different version of Excel, then just make a choice here so that you can get credit for the poll question, and then let me know by way of that Q&A panel, and I'll try to accommodate the differences in your version of Excel.
David, I have to apologize. I'm sorry, I loaded the wrong set of questions, so they are not going to get the ones that you provided me.
Uh-oh, okay.
Is that going to be okay?
Well, just that'll be just fine. We'll just wing it here. So go ahead, and we'll forge on without it. So go ahead and respond to the poll question. Just make a choice there, and that's good to know, Isaac. I'll just let you load whatever questions you have there.
Okay, I apologize.
Part of the reason that I wanted to ask that particular poll question, and we'll get by without it, but I like to get a sense of what version of Excel everyone is using. And so typically what I do is I teach from the version of Excel that the majority of attendees are using. So since I don't have that information available to me, what I will do today is just teach from Excel 2013, because I find that typically presently, at least among folks attending webinars, it's pretty evenly split in a given webinar between people using Excel 2013 or 2010. Sometimes it's a little bit more tilted toward 13, sometimes more toward 2010. But we also have some folks still using Excel 2007, and then we also have starting to slowly see more folks using Excel 2016. So it can be a little tricky trying to teach across 4 different versions of Excel, because depending on the features that I'm talking about, there can be marked differences across the different versions. But fortunately for today's material, most everything that we talk about will work the same way across the different versions. There is at least one worksheet function that is exclusive to Excel 2013 and later. And then there's also a technique that we're going to talk about that's going to be a little bit different depending on what version of Excel we're using. So I'll mostly teach from Excel 2013, but you'll also see me pull up Excel 2010 when I go to demonstrate techniques. I am known for packing a lot of learning in my presentation, so we are going to cover a lot of ground today. I do compensate for that by having very detailed handouts. So if we're talking about particular techniques, you'll see that all the steps are numbered, and so we just follow the numbered steps. Some of the slides may feel like they have a lot of information on them. That is intentional because I try to minimize having to flip from slide to slide so that you can stay oriented, and then also we just follow the numbers around the slide to carry out the technique. But if in the past I have taken techniques and spread them across a couple slides, and then if you miss a step, then suddenly you can't catch up. So that is the logic behind having all the information fitting in on one slide where I can. There is an example workbook that you can download along with today's PowerPoint, and that has most of the examples I'll be teaching from. There's also related articles tab there that has a list of articles I've written that relate to today's material. So I do try to give you a lot of takeaways from choosing one of my presentations. With that, I first want to start out with a technique before we get into the formulas, because typically when we're using lookup formulas, we will have a data set on one worksheet, and then we'll be crafting formulas on a different worksheet. And I'm sure you've experienced thousands or innumerable times in Excel, we hit that equal sign to start writing a formula. We go click on a different worksheet tab, and then suddenly we've lost all context about where we are. And if someone distracts us, then we have to go press escape and start the whole process over again and try to be cognizant of, okay, where am I working and what am I referencing and so on. So one of the ways that we can improve on that experience is to have the ability to see two workbooks on the screen, not two workbooks, two worksheets within the same workbook at the same time. Now this is that technique that we're going to talk about that is going to be a little bit different in Excel 2010 and earlier versus Excel 2013 and later. And the reason for the difference is that in Excel 2013 and later, each Excel document or Excel window, as we're going to see, opens up in its own separate container. So many of us are using multiple monitors these days, and so in Excel 2013, we're going to be able to do step 1 and step 2, and then take that new window and position it on an adjacent monitor, and then we'll be able to see both, two different worksheets at the same time. In Excel 2010 and earlier, it's going to require a few more steps, or in Excel 2013 and later, if we have only a single screen, then there's some additional steps involved in order to be able to see both worksheets at the same time. Now, a question I often get is, do I have to save my work more often when I open up this second window? And you're not duplicating the document. You're simply giving yourself the ability to see two places of the document at the same time. It's still just that single spreadsheet you're working in. You just give yourself some space, some breathing room, because you can see that both where you're creating the formula and where your data is, and it helps us write these formulas much more effectively. So the first step we're going to see is we go to Excel's View menu. The second step is we click on New Window. So when we're creating a window, we're not duplicating our document. We're simply opening up an additional window that lets us see our document in an additional fashion. Now, initially, we're going to find that it's going to feel like nothing happened because the windows are going to be stacked on top of each other. So we'll then need to rearrange them so we can see both at the same time. And so one way we'll be able to do that is in Excel 2013 and later, click that Restore button, that little square button there. That's going to reduce the size of the window so that it doesn't take up the full screen. If we have more than one monitor, we can then grab that and drag it over onto the other screen and maximize it, and then switch the worksheet tab. And we're able to be in two places in the same document at the same time. But if we don't have that arrangement, if we only have a single monitor or an earlier version of Excel, then we'll continue on through the steps. So in Excel 2013 and later, we'll have to go back to the View menu because we're going to see that when we create that new window, we get shunted off to the Home tab. And so then on the View menu, we go to the Arrange All command, which brings up an Arrange Windows dialog box. And so typically we're going to choose horizontal and then click the checkbox for Windows of Active Workbook, and then step 7, click OK. That will then arrange our worksheets so we can see both of them on the same screen at the same time. Now, initially, we'll see the same worksheet in both windows, which that can be confusing, and so that's where step 8 will click on the other worksheet that we want to see. Now, in Excel 2010 and earlier, you'll be done at this point because you'll see your two worksheets, you'll be able to work across them, and you'll be fine. But in Excel 2013 and later, what we're going to find is that the menu shows up twice, and that can consume about 1/3 of our screen space and diminish the rows that we have available to us. So the other step that we can carry out is we can double-click on the View menu twice on both view menus. That'll collapse that menu down, and then we'll have more screen space. Once we're done working with the additional window, we're simply going to close the extra window we don't need, maximize the remaining window, and then be back in our usual way of being. So to get a sense of what this is going to look like in Excel, I have a workbook here where I have some formulas that I'm going to write. We're not going to do a lookup formula yet, just a simple formula. So as I mentioned, we typed an equal sign, we go to the other tab, and then suddenly I've lost track of, wait, what was I doing? And I go back, and I'm going back and forth, and it just becomes part of that death by 1,000 cuts experience in Excel. So if I want to be able to see this worksheet and that worksheet at the same time, the steps that I will do is I will go to the View menu, I will click on New Window. When I do so, it creates the new window for me. And again, they're stacked on top of each other. So it's a little nuanced. It can feel like nothing really happened. Now, in Excel 2013 and later, if I click my Restore Down button, I can minimize that window, and then if I have an additional monitor, I can drag it on the other screen and maximize it. And so then at that point, I'm done. But let's say I don't have two screens, or let's say I'm using an earlier version of Excel. At that point, I go back to my View menu. I click on Arrange All. That gives me my Arrange Windows dialog box. I choose horizontal. I click Windows of Active Workbook, and then I click OK. So in Excel 2010 and earlier, we won't see this middle menu. We'll just see both worksheets, and we'll be done. But in Excel 2013, we see that there's that menu is duplicated. Now, I am seeing the first worksheet in both windows. So down here, I can click on the second worksheet, and so I can kind of sort of see both places. But if I double-click on the View menu, that collapses that down. Come up here and double-click on the View menu. That collapses that down. And then I've got a pretty good arrangement. So if I'm writing my formula, I type equals, and then down here I can see what I'm referencing. I just click on it, and I come in here and I drag down. And so there's just my simple formula. Get that position back here. And so we see makes it much easier to write formulas that are crossing over worksheets. So that's why I always like to lead off with this technique, because I find not many folks are doing this, and so they're experiencing where they go click on the other worksheet tab and suddenly you lose your place. This allows you to work more effectively by being able to see the whole picture all at once. Now when we're done, we simply close the remaining window, close the extra window, maximize the remaining window. To get our menu back, we can double click, and double-clicking on the View menu expands that menu back. So that kind of sets the context for how we can work more effectively across worksheets. With that, we'll move on and get an introduction to Excel's VLOOKUP function. The V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical, meaning it's going to look vertically down a column for a piece of data. So the VLOOKUP function has 4 arguments, or 4 pieces of information that it needs to know. And the first piece of information it needs to know is the lookup value. That is what we're looking for. So in this case, in cell B2, I've put a VLOOKUP formula where I want to look up a value from a listing of accounting data.